Welcome to the People of AI podcast, showcasing inspiring people with interesting stories in the field of artificial intelligence. I'm Ashley Oldacre. Let's jump right in. This podcast is sponsored by Google. Any remarks made by the speakers are their own and are not endorsed by Google. Hello, Ashley here. I am delighted to introduce you to our very special guest today, Indira Negi. Indira leads efforts at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to improve maternal and newborn health by investing in innovative devices and software that can help with early diagnosis and reduce risk during pregnancy and labor. Indira joined the foundation as a deputy director and set up the team for devices and AI in 2021. She worked at Intel for over a decade, leading the sensors engineering team for wearable devices, serving in engineering and business roles across several groups, and eventually leading strategy and planning for the health and life science business unit. She also advised Intel's corporate venture arm on health technology investments. Before joining the foundation, Indira was the vice president of product management at AliveCor, an ECG medical devices company focused on cardiology services. She holds 5 patents. Indira gets her sense of purpose from being passionate about eliminating suffering and by creating new technology and making existing technology more accessible. She gets her joy from spending time in nature, being with her dogs, family, and friends, and building things. Indira trained as an electrical engineer doing graduate thesis research in biosensors at Arizona State University. Welcome, Indira.
Thank you, Ashley. Lovely to be here. I'm super excited about this.
Very excited to have you on the podcast and for you to talk about where you have come from and what you're currently doing and the amazing things that you are creating as well. So let's start off with having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I grew up in India in a place called Dehradun, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas. And its claim to fame, I like to tell people, is that's where the Beatles went and Steve Jobs went. Like, that's where people go when they're searching for themselves. There's a lot of holy cities nearby and meditation and gurus. And I like to say, if you were born there, you were pre-found. You're just trying to get lost now. So that's where I'm from. Growing up in India, you typically have 2 choices for career. Your parents will say either become an engineer or become a doctor. You have choices in life.
Okay.
But I think I'm very, very fortunate that I actually love building. I love engineering. And I also say often that I think engineers are born, that there are just, it's just innate in you when you want to really just build stuff. I say I'm fortunate because I also have seen growing up, a lot of people were forced into engineering who really didn't want to do it. And they were, creative in other ways and they were unhappy. But fortunately, it was a good match for me. I'm very happy. I would say I was good at school because I was really actually curious about all the sciences that I was supposedly being forced to study, but I actually liked it. So that's how I was as a kid.
How did the interest in engineering manifest itself in your studies, or would you sort of play around with different things and tinker with different devices and sort of see how things fit together, or sort of how did it come about?
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of those things. I actually liked, even history, civics, like whatever I really got into became really interesting. And I actually think that might be true for a lot of people. If they just persist through the portions where things are hard, then it's really exciting because once you solve that hard thing, you feel this sense of achievement and confidence in yourself and you can go tackle something harder. That's how I felt about just studying in general. So I think, yes, school was a big one. Physics, I just loved physics as a child. I mean, my mom's a chemistry teacher also. So she had a lot of books of classes that were, 2, 3, 4 years older than where I was. So I could just go through all of those books because I was so hungry for how does the universe work? Or, how do electron clouds work? So I think that was one piece. But the other piece, and this is why I say engineers are born. My dad was in the military. He's retired. But he loved building things. He would always be tinkering around with, whatever scrap stuff in the house, building like a waterfall in our backyard. And
Oh, wow.
so I have a waterfall in my backyard because, well,
You know how to make one.
yes, because I assisted him when I was a child, and I was like, I have to have one. Obviously, houses have waterfalls in backyards. So I think there was a little bit of like practically just building whatever is needed that came from him, even though he didn't have a formal engineering education. And I think a lot of, being the child of a teacher, I think really does help orient kids better towards education, because the teachers like see all the students in their class and they know what works better for motivating the kids. So I think that combination really made me very interested in engineering. And yes, I would like take things apart and try to put them back together. That's par for the course.
Yes, absolutely. So you grew up with tinkering and with parents that sort of helped all fit this interest together. And then what happened next?
So India is very competitive because it's a big country and there's a lot of young people. I think the average age is still under 35. So basically, it's very competitive to get into colleges. Good colleges are very few in number.
Was that intimidating to you? Was that something, or did that drive you? Did that push you to like...
I think if you ask most people who did engineering or medicine in India, they would say that was probably the hardest, competitively, the hardest thing in life. And life has just been easier since then.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So I wouldn't repeat it. But I think it forced us to really get very good at the basics of math, physics, chemistry, right? Like you really have to understand
Master
it
them.
really
Yeah.
well. So I'm really grateful for the fundamentals that have developed, because I think, say you got a college education in electrical engineering. I did chip design. I don't end up using chip design. In fact, I've almost hardly ever used chip design in most of my 15 years or 13 years of working after that. But the fundamentals that you study sort of in college or pre-college, like they apply to pretty much every scientific endeavor that you undertake. Right? Like even at the Gates Foundation, for example, it's very, I would say, drugs and vaccine heavy, right? It's much more chemistry.
Right.
It's much more medical and clinical. I am a tech engineering person. And so for me to be able to make sense of that, I do have to sort of go back and rely on the basics that were built up when I was like, 20 or younger. So I am glad that we went through that high pressure crucible.
Yeah.
But I would not repeat it.
Right. Well, what was the outcome?
So I went to college in India. I guess I was the first engineer of my family. Everybody used to go to the military. So only after I came into college and other kids were preparing for their GRE to apply for masters in the US or PhD, that's when I found out you could do that. So I did the test and I applied, and I got a PhD admit to Arizona State University, which I deferred because I just started working and I'd never been paid for anything before. And I was like, whoa, somebody's paying me. It's just like a tiny amount, but I was so excited. So after a few months of working, after like 6 to 8 months of working, I realized that a lot of the core engineering work and a lot of the core research work, even in the multinational companies, even if they had like an office in Bangalore, was actually being done in Silicon Valley. It was being done in the US. And a lot of the work that wasn't as interesting was at that time being done in Bangalore, right? So I basically came and I was like, hey, I deferred my admission, but I would like to come. And I came to Arizona State. It was a spring semester. There were only like 12 students in that semester.
Had you left India before?
No.
That was your first time? Wow.
Yeah, I collected from my job. I'd collected all the cash to pay for my one-way flight ticket to the US.
Wow.
And I did have an apartment. I didn't know anybody. But my logic was this. See, if I can survive in a less safe, less developed place like India, I should be able to survive in the US. So that was my logic. It was foolish.
It was challenging, I can imagine.
I don't know. I think I was so excited for the new life. And, hope is such a positive emotion, right? Because now you're like, okay, this is going to start my life. I'm going to be able to work on interesting things and solve problems. I don't know, build something world changing. So, like, you're such an excited person at that time in life. So, I was not worried. There was no place for worry left.
Right. But in hindsight, do you think that's paid off? Do you think the hope was ultimately beneficial to help you keep going?
Yeah, definitely. I think life is not as simple as you think when you're a young, under 20-year-old. Otherwise, there would be a lot of people winning Nobel Prizes, including me. So I think I've had to adjust my ambition. And I would say I've had a good career.
A fascinating career.
Yes, in terms of...
I think so.
Thank you. No, even I think so, right? In terms of like what I've been able to experience, accomplish, learn, and the people that I've been able to work with and learn from. Because you don't just learn from your experiences, you also learn from the people that you work closely with or come in contact with. And so I think I've been very fortunate in that because I'll say at Intel, like when I was a new engineer, I think I was just 2 or 3 years in, I was probably like a super low level engineer. I had this like great boss. His name is Lakshman. He's my favorite person, I would say, outside of my family. And he was like, okay, take like 20% time, build what you think we should build because Intel's going into a new space. We're going to try to figure out phones. I was working on, let's call it my 20% project, which was, I was trying to put heart rate sensors in headphones plugged into an Intel phone. The goal was on an Intel phone, if you got an Intel processor, it would have a bunch of other sensors. And if you plugged into the sensor hub, it sounds ridiculous now, but like it seemed to make sense then. Everything, is clearer in hindsight.
In hindsight, yeah.
So if you plug into this Intel phone, like you would be able to get like heart rate because you would be able to draw extra power. You'd have, it wouldn't be a regular audio jack. You would have extra ability to pass data and power through it. So I was like, okay, why don't we put like the Intel phones will just have headphones that have heart rate. And we can add other things to it over the years. Now, this is like 2012, right? So it's not like this stuff is already there in the world. So my boss was like, fine, go work on it. Like, you just don't bother me. Go work on it. So it was like a project on my desk. And at some point, Intel's CEO at the time, Brian Krasanik, decided that, hey, we want to start a new devices group. And Mike Bell was a VP. He was an ex-Apple guy, so he had a lot of leeway. And he was like, what new devices are you going to make? And he's like, oh, we're going to make wearable devices. Well, guess there was a wearable device on my desk. That was my personal project that like nobody was paying attention to.
Wow.
So that was our first product. We launched it at CES. I got to go on stage with the CEO and show it off.
Wow.
Yes, at the CES opening keynote, which was such a dream.
Yes. Yeah.
Some people thought I was just modeling the product, even though they announced that I was building the product. That was very exciting.
And maybe we can jump into what you're doing now and how that sort of fits, unless there's a piece of the story that you want to add before joining the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
All right, maybe I'll do this very fast. So wearable devices, first product. Eventually, Intel ended up doing multiple products, multiple smartwatches. And I started leading the engineering teams that were doing all of the health sensors. So all the heart rate, we were working on ECG, some EEG, galvanic skin response for stress sensing, all of the health sensing. And then from there, I moved to the health and life sciences. I was like, what did the L stand for? Health and life sciences business unit, which is basically...
Still at Intel.
Yes, still at Intel, which is basically the business unit that works very closely with the GEs and the Philipses, helping with the designs for MRI machines and CT scanners and things like that. Because especially with more and more AI being used in radiology, in medical imaging, as is the well-known understanding of the world and it correctly, GPUs are much better at training models, right? Because you train models, you want many processing steps happening in parallel. GPUs are perfect for parallel processing. But GPUs are also expensive. And, companies like Philips and GE do not want to add a GPU into an MRI machine in addition to a general purpose processing, like, a CPU, right? They have to have that. A CPU has to control many different things in the machine.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to run AI on the machine and they chose to run it on a GPU, that would be additional cost.
Right.
And so a lot of our work was in helping them run the AI models on the CPU itself because it's already in the machine. And
this was your introduction into AI.
This was probably, the first time I was working on AI myself, as well as actually, medical devices like health sensors. All of them were in the wellness space.
Right.
And this was really the first time we were dealing with the FDA and anything truly medical. But basically, we were we were helping them run the AI models on the CPU. Because you can run the AI models on CPU at 1/10 the power of running on a GPU. Because when you're just inferring, like you're just using the model, you're not training the model, you don't need all these parallel paths, right? You're really transversing one of the paths.
Right.
And so you can do that on a CPU. It's still slower on a CPU, but it's a lot less power, and you already have the CPU. Right? So that's what we were doing.
Brilliant.
Yes.
What a fascinating project and problem to solve.
Yes. I mean, frankly, that's, Intel's a big company, so we would provide engineering support to the biggest customers, which are Philips and GE. But frankly, now that I work at the Gates Foundation and I've seen manufacturers in China that are smaller, they do the same thing, right? Eden, for example, it's a smaller manufacturer out of China, but big for China. They do the same thing. They'll train models in GPUs. They're not going to put GPUs in all their machines. That's a lot of cost, right?
Right.
So they're going to then transfer the model and make it run on the existing Intel CPU or, AMD CPU, whatever they have. So this makes the most sense. We were just making sure that our largest customers are helped along the process so they don't go the route of GPUs.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was my experience working with the medical imaging companies and with medical imaging AI. And
that seemed to have sparked an interest.
I think I was always super fascinated. So when I was in high school, I had biology as well as math. Like I was the only student in my school who had both. And the school,
as a major, as a focus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the school timetables and who's going to be in which room, that had to be done around my schedule because you were technically allowed to take both, but both of them were supposed to be everybody who wanted to become doctor did not take math, and everybody who wanted to be an engineer did not take bio because it was the course load was so much. But I was like, no, but I just want
to do it.
I want to learn, right? And then I did actually appear for the college exams for doctor as well, which are way more competitive than being an engineer, and didn't get in. But I was always fascinated with both, and I'm still super fascinated with the human body. It's just it's ridiculous. Our bodies are electrical. They are they're chemical. They are such a amazing machine. We've not been able to make we might be able to achieve AGI in some senses with our AI models running on very fast parallel computers. We are still nothing like the human body, right? I mean, our impulses, the electrical impulses in our body move so slowly, and yet we're able to react instinctively much faster than all the robots.
Yeah.
So I think the human biology has always been fascinating. So anyway, having worked with the GE and the Philipses on AI for medical imaging, that was the last thing I was doing at Intel. And then I worked at AliveCore, which is a startup. They make an ECG medical device company, ECG medical device that's they sell directly to consumer, which is a very interesting model. But it's typically recommended by the cardiologist.
Okay.
And it's for detecting atrial fibrillation, which is now well understood because it's on a Fitbit and it's on Apple Watch.
Right.
But they were, they started doing this 10, 12 years ago. Dr. Dave, he's the founder, and he's a cardiologist himself. And he was like, this is ridiculous. People are just walking around with, feeling dizzy and feeling palpitations, and
There's
they
no way for
can't
them to
find it.
check.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you wanted to check it, you would go to a doctor, they'd give you a Holter device, right? Which is like you have these electrodes on you and you go home, and now you can have like a stick-on patch. But you wear that for 7 days, or sometimes 14 days, but it's very irritating.
Yeah.
And then if they can't find it in that period, then they put like a little implantable measuring device, which you can wear for 6 months. And if they still can't find it in that period, then they're like, yeah, there's nothing to do. Just go
Yeah.
live with it.
Yeah.
And this is so easy, right? You could just measure ECG whenever you are feeling palpitations or you're feeling dizzy, and you would catch that episode. And then it's an easy to fix thing, right? You
Right.
can have an
Right.
ablation and fix it. So that's where I worked after that, because I was a huge fan. And when they were like willing to talk to me, I was very excited.
Yeah.
Also, my dad has atrial fibrillation and is a cardiac patient. So
There's a personal
yes,
interest there too.
Yes. And I thought I could learn more about the heart and more stuff that could apply. But, I'd been in contact with the Gates Foundation for many years. The Gates Foundation's team that I'm part of now, the maternal newborn child health team, they started in 2018. And I was running the health sensors engineering team at the time. And they'd invited us to come give a talk on, health sensors, what can we sense in babies and mothers, especially in low resource settings. And so I had gone to give that talk in 2018. And I'd given that talk and sort of forgotten about it. But more recently, I would say probably 2020 around is when they started investing more in health sensors. And, they were building up to more medical devices, like they were building up to ultrasound. And so they were like, hey, will you sort of look over these proposals we're getting from these companies? Because, when you start investing in some new area,
Right.
you first give like smaller grants
Right.
to, say, university professors. And when some concept gets proved out, that's when you want to increase investment in it. And at some point, you probably go to startups that can like move very fast and prove and build a product,
Right.
get FDA clearance even. But when you actually want to get like distribution, you want it like in all these countries in Africa and Asia, then you actually have very little choice. You have to go to the big players because they're the ones who have the distribution network.
Right. Right.
And so this was probably at a stage where they were starting to work with Philips on ultrasound, because it had been proven in academics that you could do blind sweeps with a handheld ultrasound, which means that you don't have to find a specific image and then do measurements on it to find, the gestational age of the fetus or to find the position of the fetus. You could train AI so that a novice user, like, even me and you should be able to do it. But in this case, it's a nurse midwife who was not quite novice, but doesn't know ultrasound. And they should just be able to go left, right, up, down, not like trying to find good images or perfect planes or anything. They're just capturing dirty video of the ultrasound. And AI should be able to then say, this is the position of the baby, it's breech, it's normal, or this is the fluid volume, amniotic fluid volume, or this is the gestational age. And so academically, this had been proved in University of North Carolina and actually working collaboratively with Google also at the beginning of the project. And now we needed to go to somebody who would productize it, right? Like if you write a paper that is good, but that doesn't reach anyone
Right.
who needs it, right?
Right.
So then the Gates Foundation had made a smaller investment in Butterfly, which is a handheld probe. And they're fantastic because they've come up with a new technology for the sensor where they can, in software, modify sort of the depth to which the ultrasound is seeing inside your body, which means that you can just use one device and you can say, I want to see like heart depth, and then you can do a cardiac ultrasound. And then you can switch it and say, I want to see kidney depth, and you can just do a kidney ultrasound. Whereas traditional ultrasounds, you have to change the heads. You, like an ultrasound head is fixed to what depth it will go.
Okay.
So that's very cool technology, but they are still a startup and they do not have sort of the distribution network that some of these big players have. And so while I love Butterfly technology and, can't wait for them to become bigger and scale, we definitely needed to go to a Philips or a GE. And so that was about the time when, they had a proposal from Philips and I was reviewing it. And it seemed like to make a full product, you need coordination between lots of different groups. And if
Right.
it's a medical product, you need a lot of coordination. There's going to be like an R&D
Right.
team that's going to
Right.
sort of develop the basic, like an architecture team, Apple calls it, or, early proof of concept. And then, if it's a medical device, the quality assurance team has to get involved.
Right.
The FDA team, the regulatory
Right.
team has to get involved. They've got to have a plan.
There's so many sort of gateways
Exactly.
to go to. Yeah.
And there's a downstream product team that's going to invest the resources of like, yes, we will take this all the way to product, because it's one thing to prove something works in a lab and one thing to make it work in every edge case.
Yeah.
We'll do the clinical trials, like we will do the marketing, we will do the distribution. And so the proposal to me read, and I was an advisor, like I'm not employed by the Gates Foundation, right? I'm like looking at it at night after my startup job, right? So I'm looking at this and it looks like it's a research team saying, yes, we'll build this thing in our R&D team.
Right.
And like, that's it. And there's like no promise of distribution, no promise of like, we will make this a product. And there's no point in going with the large multinational company like that, who is one of the lead providers of ultrasound, if you can't get that promise. Like, why would you put philanthropic dollars there? You want to put them where you can get most impact. So,
Right.
So basically, I think I became like a very overactive advisor saying, oh, no, ask for this, get commitment from the product team, get commitment from the general manager of the business unit. And I think it created like some, ruffled some feathers, because the teams hadn't even talked internally very much. And it became big enough where like it had to go up to the CEO of Philips, because you can't sign off on doing some like major new product without, he needs to know this is happening. And it became big enough, like the going back and forth with the proposals were enough. I was like, you guys need to hire somebody who has some like device background, right? Because the Gates Foundation is very limited on how many people they hire.
Yeah.
Everybody is quite stretched. And I think like Warren Buffett has this idea that you should never overhire. Like you should always be very limited on headcount.
Very lean. Yeah.
Yes. So because a lot of the Gates Foundation, and he was a trustee at the time.
Right.
The people on the Gates Foundation side who, are my peers today, that were working on this were experts in other things. Like, like there was an OBGYN doctor. There's a pediatrician doctor. They are experts at like some fields.
Right.
But nobody has any experience on like what it takes to do a medical device. So if like an R&D team says it will cost $50 million for us to build a prototype of this, they don't know if that's right.
Right. So they need someone to say, actually, no, it'll cost less or it'll cost more, which will then inform the rest of the development of the product.
Exactly. And I think now we're such good partners, because now, Philips is very involved at the highest level. The CEO has met with Bill Gates. The new CEO they had a CEO change in between. He and Bill Gates have met a few times now. And I think all of this is good for both the Gates Foundation, for, us getting return in terms of impact on the dollars invested, because this is actually going to be a product and, there's going to be an X number of units actually deployed in the world.
Yep.
But it's also really good for Philips, because now they're essentially, they're co-investing in this.
Right.
They've got a new product that their ultrasound division is going to launch. They're very excited about it. It's caused other major players to step in. Maternal care ultrasound was not like a high priority. It was like priority 7, 8. And now it's become a high priority for most companies that are doing ultrasound. So I think it's just like overall very good for the world.
Yeah.
But how I ended up there was they were like, okay, we'll open a job rec to hire for this role. And frankly, I did not think of myself as a medical device person, because I was a supplier to medical device companies.
Right.
It's not like I was in one. But I felt like I understood the foundation really well. And I think the team knew me and felt comfortable with me, because they've been working with me for a bit at nights.
Right. And had probably seen the insightful questions that you were asking that were making them think twice, or, and then apply things and move things along differently.
Yes. And also, I think because of the experience at Intel, having dealt with multiple medical device companies, because I think if you're inside one, you see like one part of it really clearly, but you don't see all of it.
Sort of the ecosystem of how it fits
exactly,
in. Right.
Exactly. So I think I had that higher level view as well. And so at some point they were like, okay, you should just come and do it. And I was like, frankly, it's not like I've ever built a medical device. You should get someone who who has that experience. But they were like, nope, I think you are right for this. And I think I was. I do think that even though I was not a medical device person per se, but just having worked with multiple companies and having seen and mapped the ecosystem from the outside, I think helped me build a very good team with experts from medical device companies.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a very interdisciplinary industry too, right? Because you're having to deal with technology, hardware, software, medicine, all sort of fitting together.
Yes.
And then, fitting that within, deployment and reaching different regions. And, so, I mean, this role almost seems so perfect for you because already from such a young age, you were telling me about how you wanted to do biology and math. This sort of mixing of these fields and of these interests has really been such an important part of your whole career, really, in sort of bridging these industries and creating some really innovative things. I'm sure when you were younger, you probably were like, oh, I'm going to do these two things that I'm interested in. But now it's like it fits so perfectly how they've all come together, and it informs sort of the expertise that you bring to then advise on investing and helping develop these medical devices.
Yeah, I think I don't believe in goals per se, but I believe in direction. So this is something that's, everybody talks about setting goals. And I think that's not necessarily, I think you can set a vision. You can be like, I want to be over there sometime. But I think setting a goal with like a deadline when there's a lot of uncertainty in the way, if you miss it, causes you to be really disappointed in yourself, which is terrible.
Right.
And if you achieve it like really easily, it just seems like you were sandbagging. That goal wasn't good. But I think if you roughly know that this is the direction you want to head in, you can make moves left or right as long as like there is there's a component of that move that's moving you closer to that angle.
Right.
And I also was very fortunate when I was at Intel. I had a very good like executive coach. Because maybe I was too frank of an engineer.
Oh, really?
Yes, I think I was very much like, that's not right.
So was this executive coach recommended to you? Or was this something that you just, were you self-aware and you're like, I think I need to work on this a little bit?
I didn't know such a thing existed. And it wasn't recommended to me by like somebody who was dealing with my work, but it was recommended to me by this awesome person, Genevieve Bell. She was an executive and she saw me present at something and she was like, oh, wow, I was the youngest person I've seen on stage. And then she realized I was actually a really lower level engineer. She asked my boss why she's still at this level. Doesn't make any sense. So she and I set up a one-on-one and I was like, I think I don't know how to talk to people because sometimes I point out where they're saying something incorrect in a large meeting, then they'll be really upset with me. Maybe I need to do an MBA and like learn how to interact. And she's like, no, you don't need an MBA. You need this coach. This was the coach that had coached her, coached a lot of like very senior Intel, like legendary leaders. Her name is Beatrice A.B. McGee, if anybody is interested. She hardly has any availability. So, but, she, her background's psychology. So she's not like a military coach who tells you this is what you do. She kind of lets you talk until you have insights yourself. And that insight just like stays with you. So one of the things which she already knew, but she wanted me to figure out, was you should be designing a career for yourself that has two components. One is the thing that gives you joy when you actually do it. Like you spend time doing a thing, it gives you joy. But you can't just have that because that may not always take you towards the direction you want to go. You should also have like small mini goal-like things or things
like milestones.
Exactly.
Stepping stones, yeah.
One of the reasons I was able to make this move to the Gates Foundation, I was a director at Intel and I was a VP at Alive Core. Gates Foundation, it was like an IC role And I
Right.
had to go build up that team. As it's going to be a very small team. I knew it's going to be like 3-4 people. Was because I was like, but I don't necessarily enjoy the meetings. That's not the best part of like my life, right? Like I
Yeah.
actually get joy from learning about new technologies, from like figuring out how they can be used, from like seeing a problem and like how that problem could be solved and then looking for the right technology to solve it. And so that move made sense. Otherwise, it was such an unconventional move. I had so many friends in tech in Silicon Valley saying, I would never even consider that. Like, your team's going to be so small. It's going to seem like you've stepped away from tech. It's going to seem like, your employability might not be the same because people are going to be like, how large were the org that you were last leading? And I was like, yeah, but if my org was just larger, would I be happier?
Right.
So
Right.
I think that advice where you have to keep going towards what gives you joy in addition to the goals you want to hit. And I think a lot of us like lose our ability to go towards what gives us joy because it seems like we're trapped now on this growth path that
Right.
is sometimes joyless.
It's a hard balance to strike, for sure. But it sounds possible, especially when we hear your story.
Yes, and I mean it's still developing, and I think that's true for everybody, right? Everybody has a story that's developing, so we can all choose to make our career such that it interleaves joy with goals.
Yes, definitely. So AI has been, you had sort of an introduction to AI when you were working on the ultrasound device, medical device. And now with sort of the exponential growth of generative AI and even AGI.
Yes.
How have you seen the introduction of AI in your field and in sort of the medical device, medical imaging industry? And how have you seen that flow into the projects that you are now funding and directing?
Yeah, so let me differentiate between the more traditional prescriptive AI, which
Right.
has become quite commonly used now in medical imaging. Right? That's what the ultrasound project was. I think it's really cool that AI can do something that you formerly needed like experts for, like a quick screening ultrasound for mothers. Think about Kenya, where like a whole county will have just like one expert and just one machine. And now imagine that like a $2,000 or a $5,000 handheld device can be used by a nurse with like almost no training.
Right.
And she can just sweep it like up, down, left, right, and it can still do a screening ultrasound because the AI is doing it. Right. So
basically using AI has trained data. So you've trained a model to be able to recognize the images. The AI model then becomes sort of the reference point for anybody to sort of cross-check what they're seeing.
Actually, we're not even asking the nurses to see what's on the images. Frankly, actually, I think we did want to get into what are some of the pitfalls of doing something like this. And so I'll mention one. So in India, gender determination before birth is illegal because people have a preference for the male child. And so you just don't know what your baby's going to be until it's born. And so ultrasounds in India for maternity are like very, very, I would say, they are held behind a lot of like paperwork, like, who did the ultrasound, the doctor, which hospital, which room in the hospital it was done. There's no undocumented ultrasounds just happening because people could choose to abort a female child. And so if you took a tool like this where people could see images on a handheld ultrasound and gave it to a bunch of nurses, then there would be rampant abuse.
Right.
But we can solve this in technology because it's not like the nurse needs to see the image. So she actually just needs to slide left, right, up, down. And
on the stomach of
the pregnant woman. Exactly. And the AI is going to tell her the risk factors. It's like, think of this as like almost like measuring someone's blood pressure. You don't actually see blood flow.
Right.
You just get a number. Right. And so I think it's so fascinating that because it's an early risk screening ultrasound, it is not replacing a final ultrasound, but it is enough to say this person is not at risk today. Right. You can do this. You can offload this to AI so much so that a human being doesn't even necessarily need to see the image. And this person anyway never used to see the image before.
Right.
So we are actually, that's one of the like downsides. We were like, what are we going to do? It's not going to be allowed in India. But I think we can solve it technologically that way.
Right. And on one hand, the advantages to that is, as you said, it opens up accessibility where you don't need a specialist trained in sort of assessing the factors, which will then prevent women from going and getting the ultrasound and having access to it. You can just provide a lot more ultrasounds by a nurse, and the AI can give sort of a general diagnosis, which can then go be sort of a starting point for the nurse to then give a direction of like, everything's okay, or actually we need to look at this and take this a step further.
Exactly. So it is not even diagnosis, it's just a risk screening, which is like medically, it's a lot less is needed when you call something a screening. But the idea in some of the low resource settings is this, right? You have some low-level facilities where births can happen, but like you can't get blood transfusions if something went wrong. You can't get a C-section if something went wrong, right? And then there are higher-level facilities where you can get them, but they're limited in like how many beds they have and how many doctors they have. So what you're trying to do from these screening ultrasounds is just to say, hey, you're going to have a normal pregnancy. You can have it here. And you can have your birth here. And you have a baby in breech position, or you're like highly anemic. If you need transfusion, we're not going to be able to do it here. So you have to go to the big hospital and you have to go there a day before and get admitted in. So it's really, you're essentially resource allocating the medical facilities to the women. And you have to choose, you can't send everybody to the higher care facility.
Right.
And so you're basically just trying to make sure that people will sometimes choose to go to the nearest facility because they had a normal birth before, or other women in their family had normal births. And I've actually, unfortunately, seen this where a family in India brought a woman to a certain village hospital that does not have C-section or blood transfusion capabilities. They were told that her baby is in breech position and that she cannot deliver, or she should not. I mean, obviously she can. Something can like miraculously go right.
Right.
But she should not deliver here. And the family was like, yeah, but we don't want to spend the time and money. We don't have that much time and money to go to the bigger hospital. So we brought her here and we'll see what happens. So what you're trying to do is like give them clarity on who should be here and who should not be here. The woman should know. The healthcare worker that the woman works with should tell her again and again, coach her, make sure that she ends up at the right facility. And that's the goal. It's not replacing the doctor doing the ultrasound. For the women who need it. That will continue to be as is, but that's so limitedly available in number, especially in a lot of Africa. So I think this is just aiding, trying to reduce some bad outcomes at the lower level facilities.
And it's already having a huge impact. You're seeing the numbers for this?
So this product is not out yet. What we're saying is pilots where this is getting used. One of the things... This is less related to the impact that the ultrasound is having in terms of like predicting adverse outcomes. This is more, WHO wants everybody to have 4 antenatal visits, 4 visits before birth to keep monitoring risk level, baby growth, etc. Most people don't do it. Most people show up like in low resource settings will show up pretty late. In Kenya, I love this story because like, I think over a period of 15 years or 14 years, Kenyan government invested in a lot of like education and awareness campaigns to say, hey, you should come for your antenatal care visits because these visits like improve outcomes because we know what is needed. We can give you iron. We can give you like the medications that you might need. And the rates went up like about 20% in like 15 years. And then when we did this pilot was done by Philips actually. Within 2 years, the rates went up 20% because all the women really wanted to come to see their baby. Like they wanted to take the time off. They wanted to walk in the heat. They wanted to get to the facility. And like, you're like, why did you go through all this? She's like, because I can see my baby's heart opening,
yes,
opening.
right. I remember hearing that.
And they would talk to each other and like the word of mouth just like really increased the ANC visits, which I mean, frankly, has been such a difficult thing to do.
Yes.
Like, how do you increase the visits?
Right.
So it's got these unexpected downstream positive
It's amazing.
effects as well.
It's amazing. I can imagine, though, there must be some risks as well. I mean, there's human error as well. But I can, with sort of the added impact of being able to get, as you said, sort of a risk assessment from this imaging device using AI, it's giving a lot more assessments,
Yes.
but there's also a lot more room for error. And so I can imagine a scenario where, the AI model is wrong and, it predicts wrongly that the baby is actually in breech and the woman is sent home saying it's fine and not. So, I mean, again, the same thing could be said for a person, but if they're an expert, like how expert is the AI with, experts? So I guess, I don't know.
Okay, so I think this conversation will be different, and maybe we will do it when we talk about generative AI, because they do make ups, like hallucinations do happen in that case. But in these cases where, we're using pretty traditional AI for medical imaging, these things are performing as good as experts, sometimes like marginally better than experts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like there's this graph that I like to show, which basically is, what it shows is that in the hands of a novice user, gestational age is estimated almost slightly better than a bunch of different experts using the expensive, like big machines.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a novice user using like a, $3,000 machine versus somebody using like a $70,000 machine expert.
Right.
And so it's doing as well as them.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, women are going not from like, hey, am I going to get something better than an expert? They're going from, I had nothing.
Right.
The previous estimation of gestational age could be off by a month because they would just ask, when was your last menstrual period?
Right.
And she'd be like, I don't know, this day.
Yeah.
They'd be off by a month. They would estimate the gestational age wrong.
Right. Even here, I was asked for my pregnancy, like, you're sort of, I guess, within these couple of weeks. Then
Exactly. And then if you guess the gestational age wrong, then you're doing like interventions wrong. You're estimating the baby's size wrong.
Right.
You're like,
is
this baby small? Is this baby normal? So these women are going from like that level of inaccuracy to almost expert level in the hands of the existing novice users. And I would also like to add another thing, right? Like yes, it's not 100%, right? It's not going to tell you gestational age accurate to the day 100% of the time.
Right. Well, neither will an expert.
Neither will an expert. What are we comparing it to? Mm-hmm. And frankly, I think some of these models are doing better than like a single expert. They're doing as well as like multiple experts reviewing things together. And so I think there's a growing sentiment, and I very strongly believe, that I think it's going to be unethical to have medical diagnosis done without AI assistance. Like, what, you're just going to use a human being? Like, you're not.
That's fascinating.
I've heard this before. I might have even mentioned this to you. It's like asking people to go on a plane without autopilot.
Right.
It's just a human pilot.
Right.
I'm not getting on a plane with just a human pilot.
But I wouldn't get on a plane without a pilot either.
That's true, right? So what we're trying to do is, there is the human being. Mm-hmm. There are some people that are on planes without pilots, or they're just hanging off the wheels or something. Those people, we're allowing them to get on a plane, or maybe not a plane. Maybe like, let's say it's a full self-driving car.
Right.
I think this analogy is starting to break.
Not going, we'll have to help this one out. But no, I hear what you're saying. It's in terms of the sort of the benchmark is just increasing for, I mean, I guess you could compare it to like a stethoscope, right? I mean, you're equipping these experts and you're equipping the medical team with better tools to help them get more information than they did before.
Exactly right.
And for anybody who wants to learn more about your projects, Indira, like, we will link the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the page. We will link all of this information. We'll link your talk as well. You have an incredible talk that describes all of this in detail. So anybody who wants to learn more about it, please visit the show notes. But yeah, since this is a People of AI podcast, let's talk about generative AI. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think overall, it's amazing that we live in this time, that we are so close to AGI. I think we might have some challenges in terms of like, what is our purpose if there are computer agents that are smarter than us and faster than us and then evolve faster than us. I mean, humans haven't changed for a long time. But leaving that aside, leaving short-term job loss aside, because I think the government can handle universal basic income, because they sort of did it during COVID, right? I think the positives are amazing because it's been a year. The Gates Foundation a year ago did a grant call for generative AI applications in health, agriculture, various priorities for the foundation. And we saw a lot of entries for health applications. And I think they're very promising. So maybe I'll talk about one type of application, which we saw in multiple countries, multiple countries trying to do this, is essentially like a co-pilot for a healthcare worker and a low-level healthcare worker, right? So like a community-level healthcare worker or a nurse midwife healthcare worker. So not someone who's like highly educated, like a doctor who's very confident in their knowledge and is an expert, right? These are people with maybe 10th grade education who are, taught a course and then they become the community health worker. They teach the women in the village about like good nutrition, how to take care of your child, yourself, etc. So, they often take direction from doctors and nurses above them. They typically receive a smartphone through the government and, they chat with the doctors and nurses. And so what a lot of different companies or organizations in different countries have done is created a co-pilot for them. So instead of like
so the challenge for this is that if everybody from these community centers are texting one or two couple of experts, that's
exactly right.
The expert is saturated with too many requests, and the community workers, they don't get the responses in a timely manner. They don't get the responses at all. So that's sort of the challenge.
That's exactly right. Sorry, I should have spelled it out. Yes, the experts are overwhelmed. There's like 200 people waiting outside the doctor's room. Like they don't have time to respond. And also, I mean, there is in different countries, the authority gap is higher than the US typically. So like a community health worker who is many rungs below a doctor doesn't just like feel comfortable asking a question that she thinks she should know the answer to a doctor very easily. So like it really will have to be escalated through a few levels before she'll get her answer and she'll feel comfortable asking the question. So she'll just like not ask. And
which could put the patients at risk.
Exactly. And it does all the time. Lots of people are suffering through this type of risk. So this co-pilot now, like they can ask it any question all the time. And
so it's a co-pilot like Bard or ChatGPT.
Exactly.
And it's using sort of these large language models, creating sort of a chatbot that's a co-pilot.
Exactly. So it's example would be like there's a child illness protocol in Brazil. It doesn't get used very often because this specific illness doesn't happen very often, but they were trained on it like, I don't know, 10 years ago. They used it 7 times in that time. And so they don't always remember all the details. So they might do the protocol wrong. But like now they can just ask it in real time to just, tell them the steps and they follow the steps. Some of these co-pilots are also being trained on local data where it's like,
Oh, perfect.
Exactly.
Right. So it's tailored.
It is tailored. Yes. And a lot of this is tailored in the language of the people. So all these co-pilots are in the language of the community. They're not often in English. One of the problems with that is the large language models are very good at English. They're also decently good at other widely spoken languages. But they're really not good when you switch between languages, which is how human beings talk.
Yes. Well, especially in communities where you have a local dialect and then you sort of have a national language and you sort of switch the words and
And most like healthcare workers, right? They're like a lot of times taught in English. Like science is taught in English.
Right.
And so they are switching between Swahili and English. They're switching between Portuguese and English, switching between Hindi and English.
Right.
And the large language models got no idea what's going on because when you start a sentence in English, it thinks the next word is English, but it's changed language. Now it thinks you're talking about something completely. So this is a problem that still needs to be solved. It's one of the problems we're
Developers out there.
Yes.
This is an important problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah. I don't know how this happens because the vocabulary is now double or, it's like 2 languages.
Yeah.
But it's not gotten better as the models have improved. But this is actually being utilized a lot by the nurses. Like I've seen pictures of like a nurse doing the chat, finding it so useful that she's printing out the chat. Like instead of like other nurses doing the chat, she's like, no, I asked the best questions. I got the best answer. She's like printing out the chats for everybody else to use.
Wow.
Which also tells you they didn't absorb the information as well from the brochures or the pamphlets that were printed for them or the books that were given to them.
Right.
Like because they were written from the point of view of probably the expert who wrote them. And these guys have different questions, or the situations they run into are different from like what the book provides.
Right. So it's tailored and specific to the situation, to the context. So it takes all of this extra information into account to give a more detailed, relevant answer and steps.
Yeah. And it's very actionable, right? Like I have this one problem now in this context, and I want this answer. And I don't want to have to derive through all the basic first principles I was taught before. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is just very actionable right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good use of co-pilots and generative AI large language models. One downside, I said, right, like the two languages problem.
Right.
I think the other more subtle thing is, at least in India and one of the programs, also in Brazil, we've seen that the healthcare workers are addressing the chatbot as sir.
Huh.
Like they are assigning a lot of authority to it.
Oh, and also turning it into a person.
Personifying it.
Right, personifying it.
And they are then also taking its direction as gospel. That is the problem, because one of the groups in India tested their reactions by repeatedly giving incorrect answers. And they didn't question it because they were like, this is coming from a source of authority, so it must be right. I must be wrong. Until like they kept going higher and higher in how wrong the answer was, until like somebody had to say like, no, I know for sure this is wrong.
Wow.
So that's a danger.
Definitely a danger. Yes. Well, and I think that speaks to sort of a larger problem too, which is not, I mean, I think that's common sort of across the board when you're interacting with these, generative AI agents or, these bots, is that even me, I can easily be fooled.
Yes.
And so I think that will be a huge cultural shift in our education and in society, is to just keep reminding everyone that when you're getting information, it's like searching on the web. It's hard because when you search in an encyclopedia or in a dictionary, that's sort of verified fact, and it's very hard to dispute that that's sort of the authority on the definition of a word, for example. I think these models are being trained with those qualifications put in place too, because it's being trained on well curated data.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think there is this, as with the evolution of the web and the evolution of AI, is not just teaching people how to use it, but teaching them to sort of apply a certain mindset to like, this is an interesting piece of information I'm getting, but let me cross-check it and just think about it twice. So
we as a society will have to like learn to do that really fast, because these are just everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's happening already too.
But I think the issue is worse when it's like someone with lesser education.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think over the years or over your increasing qualification, whatever, you gain confidence in your own expertise and your own ability.
Right.
But I think when you are not very highly educated, I don't think you trust yourself as much. And so I think that's one of the dangerous things here, where we are actually seeing people use it with the lowest level healthcare workers who don't
really
trust
taking
themselves.
it fast as for face value. Yeah.
But, some, like there's this group called Kwanele in South Africa. They work on gender-based violence, and they're using a chatbot also for, a lot of like domestic abuse is, little girls and teenagers. And so
to provide sort of resources in case something's happening at home.
So their main goal is actually to collect proof so that criminals can be prosecuted. So that's Cornelia's overall goal. They've added the chatbot to aid in this, but to also like allow for people to ask questions anonymously. Is this wrong? This happened. What should I have done? And because like imagine you're a young child, you don't know,
and you're exposed to something and you don't know what to do. Yeah,
exactly. So they've created a chatbot which people are using. It's anonymous. It's really amazing. But they put in some like effort into thinking about the personality of the chatbot, because now you're also dealing with like children,
right?
And they came up with this idea that most people are willing to talk to somebody who's a friendly aunt. So their chatbot has a friendly aunt persona.
Oh, interesting.
And I think some more effort, like thinking about what persona you give this. People are personifying it. We have to give it a persona where like maybe the community health workers are okay questioning it. Maybe we tell them it's your intern.
Oh, yeah.
Your intern's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
looking up the book and giving you answers, but question it.
Right. Or it could have like an automatic response, like, this is just what I infer as an intern, but please cross-check this information with your own.
Something like that, right?
Like
so they don't
yeah.
automatically just like trust it 100%.
Well, I have to say I'm delighted to be speaking with you today and to learn about
you,
your
Ashley.
personal experience and how you've brought your interests together. It's fascinating to hear how you've brought different parts of your interests and your background that have informed, the different products that you're working on, the different products you're developing. And it brings me hope, coming back to this concept of hope, that I find it to be just hearing you speak about the awareness that you carry around developing this technology on all of the fronts, right? Whether the hardware, the software, the ethical pieces of it. It's inspiring to hear that you're really bringing this approach into the funding and and being thoughtful about the projects that you're working on. And it's such an honor. It's such an honor to have you on the podcast and to
Thank
and
you
to
for
speak
having
with you.
me here. And I mean, I can't take all the credit. The Gates Foundation, it's an organization that's existed for a long time, and they do start
Fantastic
with
work.
the problem first, right?
Yes.
It's really like, what is causing the most mortality in this group, and then how do we solve for that? And then you're like, okay, people are dying of like eclampsia or bleeding during birth and stuff. And so how would you solve that? And so you're basically trying to go back from what is the problem.
Right. But applying these new technologies and bringing and showcasing and creating these amazing use cases using AI, which is demonstrating really the amazing power that it has in helping to solve these challenges. So it's exciting. It's so, and I feel like we're just at the beginning. I feel like it's just going to keep growing.
Oh yeah, we are.
It's a very exciting time. Yes. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ashley.
If you would like to learn more about our conversation or our guests, check out the links below. Please subscribe, and if you're feeling extra generous, give us a 5-star rating. We would love to hear from you, so leave us a comment. We'll read every one. Until next time, thank you for listening.